The courtroom was silent, the kind of silence that feels alive, humming with tension. Journalists leaned forward, pens ready, cameras poised, as if waiting for lightning to strike. This wasn't just another lawsuit. This was a collision of worlds no one thought would ever meet. Melania Trump, the former First Lady cloaked in silence and mystery, versus Jasmine Crockett, the fiery congresswoman who had made a career out of dismantling powerful figures with sharp words and unflinching courage. When news first broke that Melania Trump had sued Jasmine Crockett for defamation, it felt like a headline ripped from a political thriller. Commentators laughed it off at first. Why would Melania, who had so carefully avoided the spotlight since leaving Washington, willingly step back into the fire? But the lawsuit was real. The paperwork bore her name. And in that moment, the world shifted its gaze back to the woman once described as the quietest in the room, but the hardest to read. The case centered on a speech Jasmine Crockett had delivered months earlier. In it, she made a bold claim that Melania Trump had known far more about her husband's political and financial dealings than she had ever admitted. Crockett suggested that Melania wasn't just a bystander, but an active participant in shaping narratives that had protected Trump during his presidency. It was sharp, unfiltered, and explosive, the kind of statement that made headlines in seconds. Melania's response was swift, a defamation lawsuit. Her lawyers insisted that Crockett had crossed the line, dragging her name through the mud without evidence. The Trump camp painted Melania as the victim of political smear tactics, arguing that Crockett's words had not only damaged her reputation, but jeopardized her family's safety. But here's the thing about lawsuits. Once you file them, the discovery process begins. And discovery is a dangerous game, especially if you have secrets you thought would never see the light of day. That morning in court, Crockett's legal team was ready. They weren't there to defend words spoken on a stage. They were there to turn the spotlight back on Melania. They knew the lawsuit opened doors Melania never wanted opened. And as the first folder of evidence hit the table, whispers rippled through the courtroom like a wave. The prosecution, in this case, Crockett's defense team, presented a set of emails. At first glance, they seemed ordinary. Notes about scheduling, polite exchanges, words of thanks. But context is everything, and context was about to shatter Melania Trump's carefully crafted silence. One email stood out immediately. Written during a moment of national scandal, it read, "We must control the message, no matter what the truth is. Appearances matter more than reality." The words weren't shouted from a podium. They weren't part of a speech. They were written in private, meant only for trusted eyes. And yet here they were, projected onto a screen for the jury, the gallery, and the world to see. The gallery gasped. Journalists scribbled furiously. Melania's face remained unreadable, her chin tilted upward, her composure unbroken. But beneath the calm surface, the cracks were spreading. Jasmine Crockett sat still, her eyes fixed on the screen, her hands folded on the table. She didn't gloat, didn't smirk. She didn't need to. The emails were doing the work for her. The judge called for order as murmurs threatened to overtake the room. But the moment had already landed. Melania's lawsuit, meant to silence Crockett, had opened a Pandora's box. The defense attorney, representing Crockett, spoke with deliberate calm. "Ladies and gentlemen of the jury, this case is not about reckless words or baseless accusations. It is about truth. And truth, as we are beginning to see, was hidden in plain sight. Mrs. Trump accuses my client of damaging her reputation, yet it is Mrs. Trump's own words, written in her own hand, that reveal a reality the American people never knew." The courtroom buzzed again, louder this time. Melania's legal team scrambled to object, arguing context, interpretation, privacy. But the damage was done. The seed of doubt had been planted, and once planted, seeds grow. What followed was a meticulous unveiling. Email after email was displayed, each one a thread in a tapestry of influence. In private, Melania wasn't distant, disengaged, or reluctant. She was strategic, deliberate, calculating. She gave notes on speeches, suggested talking points, even hinted at how certain stories might be spun to protect her husband's image. One particularly damning email came from the height of a financial investigation. "The narrative must focus on loyalty and family," she wrote. "Do not let them turn this into betrayal. We decide the story before they do." The room froze at those words. They weren't illegal. They weren't treasonous. But they were revelatory. They showed that Melania's role was far from passive. She wasn't just the quiet spouse standing behind the president. She was part of the machinery, shaping narratives with the precision of someone who understood the stakes. By the end of the morning session, the energy had shifted completely. What had begun as Melania's offensive strike against Crockett had transformed into a defense of her own legacy. The emails weren't just evidence. They were a mirror, reflecting back an image she had worked tirelessly to keep hidden. Outside the courthouse, the story exploded across the media. Headlines screamed, "Melania's emails shatter courtroom silence." Lawsuit backfires as Trump legacy questioned. From plaintiff to defendant, Melania's case collapses. Cable news anchors replayed the words again and again, "We must control the message, no matter what the truth is." Those words became a symbol, not just of the trial, but of the entire Trump era, the idea that appearances mattered more than reality. And as Melania walked out of the courthouse that day, her sunglasses shielding her from the flashes of cameras, one truth had become undeniable. She had filed this lawsuit to protect her legacy. Instead, it had set the stage for its collapse. The second day of the trial opened with even greater intensity. The courthouse steps were jammed with protesters, counter-protesters, and a sea of cameras that turned every movement into breaking news. Commentators speculated through the night, asking the same question. Had Melania Trump's lawsuit against Jasmine Crockett already doomed her legacy before the jury had even spoken? Inside the courtroom, the atmosphere was thick with anticipation. Melania entered with her lawyers, her head high, her face unreadable. But her silence, once her greatest strength, now carried a different weight. It no longer looked like quiet dignity. It looked like avoidance. The defense team, representing Jasmine Crockett, wasted no time. They began by revisiting the emails from the previous day, reinforcing their narrative that Melania wasn't simply a bystander to history, but a hidden strategist. Each email was a puzzle piece, and when assembled, they revealed a picture the public had never seen before. But today, there was something more, something that would shatter the case beyond repair. The defense attorney paused, letting the room settle into silence. Then he introduced what he called the hidden archive. These were not just emails unearthed through standard discovery. These were encrypted communications, painstakingly retrieved and verified. And in them lay the words that would turn this lawsuit into a self-inflicted wound. The first was read aloud to the courtroom. It was short, almost cryptic. "The story must be ours, even if the facts are not." The words fell like a hammer. The jury shifted uncomfortably. Journalists' fingers raced across keyboards. The gallery gasped audibly. This wasn't simply a suggestion of strategy. It was an admission of manufacturing perception, regardless of truth. Melania's lawyers sprang to their feet with objections, shouting about context, about relevance, about privacy. But the judge allowed it. The email was in evidence. And once spoken, words cannot be unsaid. The defense built their case with precision. They juxtaposed Melania's private words with her public image. A speech about compassion, side by side with an email describing how tragedy could be used to build resilience optics. A statement about loyalty, contrasted with a message advising staff to pivot away from weakness before it spreads. Each pairing wasn't just a revelation. It was a betrayal of the narrative that had protected her for years. The First Lady, once painted as reluctant, aloof, even unwilling, was revealed as deliberate, engaged, and deeply involved in shaping perception. The irony was unmistakable. Melania had sued Jasmine Crockett to silence accusations of duplicity. Instead, she had handed Crockett the ammunition to prove them. By midday, the tension in the courtroom was suffocating. The defense called a witness, a former aide who had worked directly with Melania during moments of crisis. Calm and measured, the aide testified that Melania's silence was never passive. She understood that words could build walls or tear them down, the aide said. Her quiet wasn't disinterest. It was calculation. The line landed like a thunderclap. The gallery stirred. The jury leaned in. Melania sat still, her face a mask of composure, but her stillness only amplified the weight of the testimony. The defense attorney turned toward the jury, his voice low but deliberate. This case began as a claim of defamation. But what we see now is not defamation. It is revelation. Mrs. Trump's own words reveal the truth my client spoke, a truth she tried to silence through the courts. But in her attempt to bury it, she unearthed it herself. The prosecution, Melania's team, fought back with everything they had. They reminded the jury that these were private communications, never meant for public consumption. They argued that strategy does not equal deceit, that leadership requires difficult choices, that every politician and their family frame narratives to survive. They pleaded with the jury not to confuse calculation with corruption. But it was too late. The narrative had shifted, and in trials like these, narrative often matters more than law. By the time the judge called for recess, the courthouse had become a storm. Outside, headlines flashed across giant screens. Melania's emails betray her legacy. From silence to strategy. The First Lady unmasked. Crockett vindicated in stunning courtroom twist. Cable networks looped the line again and again. The story must be ours, even if the facts are not. Commentators debated its meaning, but its symbolism was undeniable. In those 11 words, Melania Trump's carefully constructed image collapsed. That evening, as she left the courthouse, cameras swarmed, reporters shouted, and protesters jeered. For the first time, she looked shaken. The sunglasses no longer shielded her. The silence no longer protected her. She was no longer the mysterious First Lady, hidden behind an enigmatic smile. She was a woman whose own words had betrayed her. The lawsuit that was meant to protect her dignity had become the very instrument of its destruction. And Jasmine Crockett? She didn't need to say a word. She didn't need to gloat, didn't need to posture. She simply walked out of the courthouse, her head high, her name now synonymous with victory. The battle Melania Trump had chosen had turned into a war against herself. And in that war, her legacy was the only casualty that mattered. The trial wasn't over, but the verdict had already been written in the court of public opinion. And sometimes that verdict is the only one that lasts.